21 bodies, 11 children, 3 husbands, all dead by the same woman's hand within 7 years. Her name was Mary Ann Cotton, and she turned the sacred bond between caregiver and child into something far more sinister. In 1872, in the coal-blackened village of West Auckland, County Durham, neighbors whispered about the woman who seemed to attract death like a magnet. Children who played in her yard one day would be buried in the churchyard the next. Husbands who kissed her goodnight never saw another sunrise. But Mary Ann Cotton wasn't just any killer. She was a trained nurse, a woman people trusted with their most precious possessions. Their children, their sick, their dying. She carried the tools of healing in one hand and the instruments of death in the other. This is the story of Britain's first female serial killer, a woman who served revenge cold, methodical, and deadly, and who left behind a trail of bodies that would shake Victorian England to its core. The year was 1832, when Mary Ann Robson was born into the harsh world of Victorian working-class life in Low Moorsley, Durham. The daughter of a coal miner, she knew poverty, struggle, and the bitter taste of disappointment from her first breath. Her father died when she was 8, leaving her mother to raise 5 children alone in a world that showed little mercy to widows. But Mary Ann was different. Even as a child, neighbors noticed something cold behind her eyes, something calculating. While other girls played with dolls, she watched, she learned, she memorized the patterns of death that swept through their mining village like clockwork. At 16, Mary Ann left home to train as a nurse. In those days, nursing was less about medicine and more about comfort, about being present when death came calling. She learned to read the signs, the labored breathing, the fever sweats, the final moments when the body surrendered to whatever consumed it from within. She also learned something else, something that would define the rest of her murderous career. She learned that arsenic was everywhere in Victorian England, in wallpaper, in candles, in rat poison that cost just a few pennies and could be bought without question from any corner shop. And she learned that when mixed with tea or porridge, it produced symptoms identical to the stomach ailments that regularly killed the poor: vomiting, diarrhea, convulsions, death. Nobody suspected the caring nurse who held their loved ones' hands as they died. In 1852, Mary Ann married William Mowbray, a laborer with dreams bigger than his paycheck. They moved to Plymouth, where William found work at the docks. For a brief moment, it seemed Mary Ann might live a normal life, but normalcy was never enough for Mary Ann Cotton. Within months of their marriage, their first child fell ill, then the second, then the third. One by one, William watched his children waste away from mysterious stomach ailments that doctors couldn't explain or cure. The babies who survived infancy died as toddlers. The toddlers who learned to walk died before their 5th birthdays. But that tiny voice inside was too important to ignore. 8 children, 8 funerals, 8 insurance payouts that kept the Mowbray household afloat, even as it sank deeper into grief. William himself began showing symptoms in 1864. The same stomach pains, the same violent sickness that had claimed their children. Mary Ann played the devoted wife, spoon-feeding him broth and medicine, while neighbors praised her dedication. When William died, Mary Ann collected his life insurance policy. She was a widow at 32, with a talent for survival and a taste for financial security that only death could provide. But one husband's insurance money doesn't last forever, and Mary Ann had developed expensive tastes. Within months, she had married George Ward, a laborer she met at a local dance hall. George was a kind man, gentle with children, hopeful about their future together. He died within 14 months. Another husband, another policy, another funeral where Marianne wept convincingly into her black handkerchief. The pattern was established. Marianne would find a man with steady work and life insurance. She would charm him, marry him, then slowly poison him while playing the devoted wife. She collected insurance money with the same efficiency other women collected recipes. But husbands weren't her only victims. Between marriages, Marianne worked as a private nurse and housekeeper for wealthy families throughout northern England. She specialized in caring for children and the elderly, the vulnerable, those whose deaths would be mourned but not investigated too closely. Parents trusted her completely. She had trained credentials. She came recommended. She had a soft way with children that made them feel safe even as they grew sicker under her care. What they didn't know was that Marianne had begun to see people not as human beings, but as walking insurance policies. Every child in her care represented potential profit. Every elderly patient was a business opportunity. She poisoned them slowly, carefully, with just enough arsenic to mimic common illnesses. A teaspoon in their milk, a pinch in their evening porridge, just enough to cause stomach upset, then more serious symptoms, then death. The family she worked for praised her dedication as she sat vigil beside dying children. They recommended her to friends. They paid her bonuses for her compassionate care during their loved ones' final days. Marianne was building a reputation as the nurse you called when death was inevitable. What no one realized was that death became inevitable the moment she walked through your door. In 1865, Marianne married her third husband, James Robinson, a widower with 5 children. It should have been her chance at happiness, a ready-made family, a fresh start.
Instead, it became her most productive killing spree. Within weeks of the wedding, Robinson's youngest daughter fell ill with stomach problems. Marianne nursed her tenderly, bringing her special meals and medicine. The child died within a month. Then Robinson's mother, who lived with the family, began showing similar symptoms. Another funeral. Another grieving family member who praised Marianne's devoted care. One by one, Robinson's children fell victim to the same mysterious illness. Always the stomach. Always the same progression from health to death. Always with Marianne by their side, offering comfort and care. But James Robinson wasn't a fool. After 3 of his children died within 6 months, he began to notice patterns. The way Marianne would prepare special meals for the sick. The way symptoms would worsen after her visits. The way she always seemed more concerned with insurance payments than grieving. When Marianne suggested taking out a life insurance policy on his last surviving daughter, Robinson finally understood what he had married. He confronted her. She denied everything, but when he threatened to go to the police, Marianne simply disappeared one night, taking whatever valuables she could carry. She left behind 4 graves, and a man who would spend the rest of his life wondering if he could have saved his children. But Marianne Cotton wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. In 1870, she arrived in the village of West Auckland, County Durham, calling herself a widow in need of work. The local colliery foreman, Frederick Cotton, hired her as a housekeeper and was charmed by her efficiency and warmth. They married within months. Frederick Cotton had no way of knowing he had just signed his own death warrant. The newlyweds seemed happy at first, Marianne played the role of devoted wife perfectly. She cooked Frederick's meals, mended his clothes, and spoke fondly of their future together. But Frederick had something Marianne wanted more than companionship. He had a substantial life insurance policy through the Miners' Union, and he had a son from his previous marriage, Charles Edward Cotton, who also had a small policy. Within a year, Frederick was dead from the same mysterious stomach ailment that had claimed Marianne's previous husbands, and his son, Charles Edward, was showing the same symptoms. This time, however, someone was paying attention. Thomas Riley, a local parish official, had been asked to help Marianne nurse a woman with smallpox. During their conversation, Marianne mentioned that Charles Edward was in the way, and asked if the boy could be committed to the workhouse. "I won't be troubled long with him," she said casually. "He'll go like all the rest of the Cotton family." Riley was stunned by her callous attitude toward a child who was supposedly under her care. When Charles Edward died just days later, Riley remembered her words and contacted the police. For the first time in Marianne Cotton's murderous career, someone was asking questions. The investigation revealed a trail of death that stretched across 3 decades and multiple counties. Everywhere Marianne had lived, children had died, husbands had perished, elderly relatives had succumbed to mysterious illnesses. But it was the examination of Charles Edward Cotton's body that finally provided the evidence investigators needed. The autopsy revealed massive amounts of arsenic in the child's system, enough to kill several adults. When police searched Marianne's home, they found more arsenic hidden in her belongings, enough to poison dozens of people. Marianne was arrested in July 1872 and charged with the murder of Charles Edward Cotton. During her trial, prosecutors painted a picture of a woman who had turned caregiving into a business model for murder. The evidence was overwhelming. Between 1865 and 1872, Marianne Cotton poisoned 21 people with arsenic, including 3 husbands, a lover, and 11 of her own children. She had collected thousands of pounds in insurance money while playing the role of grieving widow and devoted caregiver. It was reported that Marianne Cotton had poisoned wholesale those who had ought to have been most dear to her, including 3 out of her 4 husbands and 11 of her 13 children. Her motive: the insurance policies she had taken out on her relatives. The jury deliberated for just 90 minutes before returning a guilty verdict. Marianne Cotton was hanged on March 24, 1873, at Durham Prison. She was 40 years old, but her legacy lived on in the nightmares of Victorian parents who wondered if their trusted caregivers might be harboring deadly secrets. She had shattered the fundamental assumption that those who care for us wish us well. The wet nurse who served revenge had finally been stopped, but the fear she created lingered for generations. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think drove Marianne Cotton to murder so many innocent children. Was it pure greed or something darker? In an age when we trust caregivers with our most vulnerable loved ones, Marianne Cotton's story serves as a chilling reminder that evil often wears the mask of compassion. She turned the sacred act of nursing into an instrument of death, proving that sometimes the greatest monsters are those we invite into our homes to heal us. The next time you trust someone with those you love most, remember Marianne Cotton, and remember that the hands that offer comfort can sometimes deliver death instead.